Welcome back, everybody. Ready to dive into another deep dive with me. Today, we're going to be looking at something pretty fascinating
Nice.
and potentially pretty controversial. And that's the possibility of historical erasure in Bulgaria. So
Looking forward to it.
we're going to examine some evidence and see what conclusions we can draw about how history is presented and what that presentation might mean.
Yeah, it's going to be a fascinating journey.
Exactly. Our main focus today is the National Archaeological Museum in Sofia. They've got this interesting artifact there.
Okay.
It's a column with this inscription referencing the god Tangra and a guy named Khan Omertag from way back in the 9th century CE.
Wow. 9th century.
Yeah. And this inscription is controversial because it sort of points to this Turkic connection that some Bulgarian nationalists would rather just kind of sweep under the rug.
Interesting.
Like it never happened.
Yeah.
And it's not just this one column.
Yeah.
Out of all the artifacts they have on display there, only less than a dozen represent the 500 years of the Ottoman period.
Wow. That's a pretty big discrepancy.
It really makes you wonder, what stories are being told there and what stories might be missing.
Yeah, for sure. So let's start with this column and the controversy surrounding it. Can you describe the inscription in a bit more detail and maybe its significance?
Absolutely. So the column itself is pretty remarkable.
Okay.
It's got this inscription on it, and it basically details a sacrifice to the god Tangra by this Khan Omertag.
Yeah.
Now, Tangra was like the top god in the early Bulgar religion.
Okay.
So this inscription links him to like this prominent Bulgarian ruler.
Yeah.
And what's so fascinating is how people react to this inscription. Like some Bulgarian nationalists, they see it as like a later addition or even like a straight up forgery. Like they just reject the connection to Tangra.
Ah.
And by doing that, they reject the Turkic roots that it implies.
So they're kind of picking and choosing what fits their narrative.
Exactly. It's like they want to create this very specific story of Bulgarian identity.
Right.
One that emphasizes a purely Slavic origin.
To understand this perspective, though, we need to kind of dig into the historical context of Tangra. He was a central figure in the early Bulgar belief system.
Right.
And his influence didn't just disappear with the arrival of Christianity.
Oh, yeah.
He was actually absorbed into Slavic mythology, and he became intertwined with their existing beliefs.
So it's not like one belief system totally replaced another. It's more like this blend.
Exactly. It's a fusion of different cultural and religious elements.
Which makes denying that inscription even more bizarre.
Yeah.
Why reject this proof of this cultural fusion when it's so clearly there in the historical record?
Yeah, it's like trying to erase a color from the spectrum,
right?
Claiming it never existed.
But that color, that influence, it's still there. It's woven into the fabric of Bulgarian history.
For sure. So do you think this attempt to erase certain elements is connected to a larger pattern of historical manipulation? Or do you think it's like a specific agenda?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And to answer it, we got to look at another really important event in Bulgarian history. The conversion to Christianity under Boris I back in the 9th century.
Okay.
And this wasn't exactly a peaceful transition.
Oh, I bet.
It involved the forceful suppression of pagan beliefs.
Wow.
Including the beliefs related to Tangra.
Really?
And there were even rebellions against this Christianization that were brutally crushed.
Wow. So it was really imposed upon the people.
It's a pretty stark reminder of how power dynamics and religious conversions can just completely reshape cultural identity.
Yeah.
And often lead to this suppression or sometimes even the complete erasure of certain narratives.
Makes you think about the motivations behind this conversion. Was it purely religious zeal, or were there political factors at play too?
It was definitely a mix. It wasn't just one or the other. Religious fervor definitely played a role.
Yeah.
But there were also some very significant political implications. Aligning Bulgaria with the powerful Byzantine Empire through Christianity was a strategic move.
It makes sense.
It offered protection and opened up these new avenues for both political and cultural exchange.
Right.
But that alignment came with a cost. A cost that involved suppressing existing beliefs and practices.
Yeah, so this forceful conversion set a precedent.
Exactly. It's like a pattern of shaping this unified national identity, even if it meant like minimizing or erasing elements that didn't fit into the story they wanted to tell.
Right. And this tendency, this desire for homogeneity that might have continued to influence how they presented periods of Bulgarian history that came later on.
Yeah.
Particularly the Ottoman era.
Which brings us to kind of the elephant in the room, or the missing elephant in the museum, I should say. 500 years of Ottoman rule And they only have less than a dozen artifacts.
It's a huge discrepancy.
What are the possible explanations for this? Is it a deliberate attempt at erasure? Or are there other things going on?
There could be a few reasons for it. I mean, some artifacts could have been destroyed or just lost over time. But we also have to consider that maybe it was a deliberate curatorial choice. You know, maybe there's a bias there.
Yeah.
A desire to present a specific narrative of Bulgarian history that minimizes or downplays the influence of the Ottomans.
That's a really interesting point.
Yeah.
It suggests that how history is presented can be just as revealing as the historical events themselves.
Yeah.
And it makes you think about the ethics of it all. What do we lose when we erase or downplay parts of history?
Yeah.
How does it change how we understand a nation's identity and cultural heritage?
Such a complex issue with big consequences. Yeah, it really is. When we do it, when we erase or minimize certain parts of history, we risk creating this distorted and incomplete understanding of the past.
Right.
Like, imagine you're trying to put together a puzzle, but some of the pieces are missing.
Oh, yeah.
You might be able to force the remaining pieces together.
Right.
The picture is going to be all messed up and incomplete.
Right. And in the case of Bulgaria, one of those missing pieces seems to be the Ottoman period. 5 centuries of history condensed into just a handful of artifacts.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And
Yeah.
it makes you think about how we interpret and prioritize different historical periods.
Right.
Like, why is the Ottoman era seemingly given less importance than others?
Yeah.
Is it because it challenges a particular vision of Bulgarian identity?
That's a really good point. It does seem like there's this tendency to emphasize the periods that reinforce a particular narrative of Bulgarian history,
Yeah.
one that prioritizes this certain cultural and ethnic homogeneity,
Uh-huh.
and anything that challenges that narrative, whether it's the Turkic influence from Tangra or the long period of Ottoman rule, it's downplayed or even erased.
This tendency to create a homogenized narrative is especially troubling when we think about ethnic assimilation and cleansing in Bulgarian history.
Absolutely.
It's not a happy topic, but we can't ignore it if we want to really understand the complexities of the past.
We can't. We already touched on the forced conversion to Christianity under Boris I.
Right.
A period marked by so much violence and suppression of people who held on to their pagan beliefs.
Yeah.
But this pattern of imposing a singular identity didn't stop there.
Oh, no.
Throughout Bulgarian history, there have been instances of ethnic and religious minorities being pressured to conform,
Right.
to assimilate into the dominant culture.
It's a reminder of the dangers of these ethnocentric narratives. Narratives that put one group's perspective above others. These kinds of narratives can lead to the justification of assimilation and cleansing, as we've seen throughout history.
Absolutely. And this brings us back to the potential erasure of Turkic influences in Bulgarian history.
Okay.
Denying the Tangra inscription and underrepresenting the Ottoman period could be seen as part of this bigger trend.
Wow.
This trend of downplaying or erasing elements that don't fit into a specific narrative of Bulgarian identity.
It seems like a vicious cycle, this desire for a homogenized national identity leading to the suppression of certain historical narratives, which then in turn reinforces that desire for homogeneity. So how do we break that cycle?
That's the question.
How do we ensure a more inclusive and accurate understanding of history?
I think it starts with acknowledging the complexities of the past.
Okay.
We have to recognize that history isn't just black and white.
Right.
It's more like a tapestry woven with threads of different cultures, religions, and ethnicities.
Yeah.
And each thread, even the ones that might be considered uncomfortable or challenging, they all contribute to the richness and depth of that tapestry.
So it's not about erasing or minimizing certain parts of history.
Yeah.
It's about embracing the full spectrum of the past, even the aspects that might challenge our preconceived notions or make us question our understanding of national identity.
Exactly. It applies not just to Bulgaria, but to all nations.
Right.
We need to move past these simplistic ethnocentric narratives and embrace a more inclusive and nuanced understanding of history. It's the only way to truly learn from the past and to build a more just and equitable future.
This deep dive has been really thought-provoking. It's made me realize that history isn't just about remembering dates and events.
No, it's not.
It's about understanding this complex interplay of forces that have shaped the world we live in.
And it's a dynamic process.
Yeah.
History is constantly being reinterpreted and rewritten as new evidence comes to light and new perspectives are brought into the conversation.
That makes me wonder about the role of museums in shaping our understanding of history.
Mm.
We talked about the National Archaeological Museum in Sofia and their very limited display of the Ottoman period.
Mm.
Do you think museums have a responsibility to present a more balanced and inclusive view of the past?
Absolutely. Museums aren't just places to store artifacts.
Right.
They're powerful institutions that play a crucial role in shaping how the public understands history and culture.
Yeah.
They have a responsibility to present a diverse range of perspectives
Okay.
and to avoid promoting narratives that erase or distort parts of the past.
It's like they're curating not just objects,
Yeah.
but also narratives. And those narratives can have a huge impact on how we see ourselves and the world around us.
They really can.
So it's vital that those narratives are as accurate and inclusive as possible.
I agree. Museums have the power to challenge our assumptions, to broaden our perspectives, and to deepen our understanding of the human experience. But if they're not careful, they can also reinforce existing biases and perpetuate harmful stereotypes.
That raises a really important question. How can we make sure that museums are fulfilling their role as responsible stewards of history?
Yeah.
How can we encourage them to present a more balanced and nuanced view of the past?
That's a fantastic question, and one that we're going to dig into in the next part of our deep dive. Stay tuned.
We were talking about the responsibility of museums to present like a balanced and inclusive view of history.
Yeah.
And it's a tough thing to get right. How can museums do this without rewriting history or, pushing a certain agenda?
Yeah, it's tricky. They need to be really upfront about the choices they make when curating exhibits and admit that, no historical narrative is completely objective.
Okay.
They should try to present different perspectives, even the controversial ones, or the ones that challenge the mainstream narratives.
So instead of just laying out a single version of history, museums should show a more multifaceted view.
Exactly.
So visitors can engage with different interpretations.
They make up their own minds.
Yeah, think of it like presenting evidence instead of giving a verdict.
Okay.
They can show artifacts and information in a way that encourages critical thinking.
Yeah.
And starts conversations. Like when they display something like that column with the Tangra inscription,
Yeah.
they could show the different ways people understand it.
Right.
Talk about the arguments for why it's authentic.
Yeah.
And also why some people might doubt it.
That way, visitors can grapple with the complexity of history, weigh the evidence, and form their own opinions.
Exactly.
It's a lot more engaging and intellectually stimulating than just giving them a one-sided story. Definitely. It also encourages a more honest and nuanced understanding of the past.
Right. Instead of trying to sweep uncomfortable parts of history under the rug, museums can use them as learning opportunities.
Exactly. We've talked a lot about how the Ottoman period in Bulgarian history might be getting erased. So how could a museum address that responsibly and informatively?
Yeah, how could they do that?
There are a lot of options. They could create exhibits that really explore what life was like during the Ottoman period.
Okay.
The culture, the society, the economy. Show artifacts, documents personal stories that shed light on this era that's so often overlooked.
Yeah.
They could even hold lectures and discussions that bring together scholars with different viewpoints.
Okay.
So they can have a real conversation about the legacy of the Ottomans in Bulgaria.
So it's about filling in those missing pieces of the historical puzzle, bringing back the threads that have been erased or pushed aside,
Yes.
creating a more complete and vibrant tapestry of the past.
And it's not just about having more accurate history, it's also about fostering empathy and understanding.
Right. When we engage with the messiness of history, when we try to see the world through the eyes of people who lived in different times, we develop a greater appreciation for just how diverse the human experience is.
I completely agree. This deep dive has been a real journey of discovery. It's challenged me to rethink things, and it's definitely made me realize the importance of always questioning the stories we're told.
Absolutely. This has been eye-opening for me too. It's made me realize how much we need to keep digging, keep asking questions, keep learning and growing.
I think that's a perfect note to end on.
Yeah, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Bulgarian history. We hope it's made you curious and maybe inspired you to look at the past in a new way. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning.